Hello, listeners. Welcome to episode number 96 of the Avocado Games Cast. That is 12 times 8 for all you arithmetic fans out there. We've got a lot to talk about today. We've all been playing a lot of games, and we're eager to chat about them. We're less eager to chat about industry layoffs, including at Marathon and Destiny 2 developer Bungie. But, dutifully, we're still going to do it. And finally, the last part of this episode will be devoted to a full spoiler chat for Starfield. So, if you've completed the game, stick around to hear our thoughts. And if you haven't, no worries, just hit pause and come back to this episode when you've finished the game. Don't worry, it'll still be there for you, it's not going anywhere. But before we get to all of that, let's introduce ourselves. My name's Merve, and joining me, he's hunting down all the artifacts in an effort to become Starborn. It's the Kappa.
Hey, what's up?
And she'll subscribe to any Dutch YouTuber in stilettos, making her podcast debut. Give a warm welcome to QuinleyThorne.
Hi, thank you. Excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. It's so nice to have a new voice on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I've listened to a lot of podcasts, but I've never actually been on one, so this is exciting.
That's actually good prep because when we started this podcast, I barely ever listened to podcasts. I listened to like maybe 2 podcast episodes, and I'm like, I know what I'm doing. We can start this. I did not know what I was doing. Now I listen to podcasts pretty much all day long, like anytime doing chores or like getting ready. There's a podcast playing in the background.
Right.
So, how are you folks?
To a ton, and it's just I don't know. Like I thought it was gonna be harder, honestly, to make, but
Yeah, this is so easy. Anyone can do it.
It's like, I thought this was I mean, it explains why like everybody and their mom has one, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like,
It's true.
It's just you're just posting verbally.
Pretty much. Like, I think to make an entertaining podcast, it does take some amount of skill and to figure out how exactly you're going to pace a podcast, sure. But if your podcast is just talking to a mic for 2 hours, yeah, pretty much anyone can do that. Just get a mic, right?
Yeah.
So, we've all been playing video games. I would actually like to start by chatting about a video game that I finished just last night called Dordogne. So, I don't know. Have you folks heard of this one?
no.
I saw the trailer. It is gorgeous. It's very pretty. It reminded me like if a French studio made a Studio Ghibli game almost, like the art style. It looked really cool, but it also kind of to me it's pretty, but I'm like if I get that, I know I'm only gonna play it the one time. So
I'm
Yeah,
surprised
that makes
you're not
sense.
playing the Thirsty Suitors. I thought that was gonna be
oh
your
yeah, that's
pick.
is
Oh no, I have. We can get into cultural trauma in a second.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I can touch that one for a lot of reasons. Um, for many of the same reasons that Venba kind of irritated me towards the end. But Dordogne. So, like Quinley alluded to, this is a very gorgeous game, watercolor kind of art style, but it even animates super well. Like it looks really cool in motion, and it does have those like Studio Ghibli vibes, like almost like a kind of higher stakes My Neighbor Totoro. That's what I describe it as.
Okay. Same kind of
higher
vibe.
stakes. Like
Yeah,
higher stakes as in like
like My Neighbor Totoro. It's about like 5-year olds, right? And I guess there is some danger right towards the end of the movie, but it's really pretty lazy the entire way through. Dordogne kind of sets its stakes up at the beginning, and it does have that lazy summer vibe, but you know that there's more going on under the surface right from the outset.
okay.
So yeah, really interesting. It's set in the eponymous Department of France, Dordogne, along its eponymous river, also called Dordogne, right? I actually decided to play this in French, and I very rarely play game. I think this is the first game I've actually played in French. French is technically my third language, although I'm much more fluent in it than I am in Hindi. So yeah, this is interesting to play a game in French. I was mistaken. I thought that the script was originally written in French. Then the credits rolled, and apparently it was translated from English into French by this French studio, uh, which is surprising. But the same person who wrote the English script also translated it into French. So I think that the French version pretty accurately reflects authorial intent. So I don't think it was. I made a mistake in picking it. So yeah, it's nice to play a game set in France in French. I'm Canadian, so certain idioms and certain vocabulary are familiar to me. So I'm playing it with Google Translate open on my phone, which, it's not like I have to do this constantly, but, every 20 minutes just as something comes up, I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know exactly this term. But otherwise, pretty smooth sailing. And what's also interesting is that there's not just an English and French version of this game, there's also a version in Occitan. Occitan is an endangered Romance language, so it's not, everyone knows Portuguese, Italian, French, Spanish, and probably Romanian and Catalan, right? But there are a whole bunch of other Romance languages like Monegasque, Sicilian, Occitan, etc., that are on the verge of dying. And so, in keeping with this game's southwestern French setting, they've also produced an Occitan script.
Is it like an Esperanto thing?
No, it's not Esperanto. It's not a constructed language. It's just one of those Romance languages that is dying out. So it's related to French and Italian and Catalan. Actually, its closest cousin is Catalan, but it's spoken by very few people today, and it's one of those languages that people are still trying to keep alive. So
It's really cool.
Interesting they've got that script. So yeah, narrative adventure. You're playing as an adult going through the home of her grandmother where she used to spend the summer, and she's piecing together memories of the summer she spent with her and how that led to a rift widening between her father and her grandmother. And so it's a lot of picking up objects, manipulating them, walking through the house, recalling memories, then playing through those memories, and visiting the environs, paddling down the Dordogne river in a kayak, visiting the market square, etc. Very cozy, very lived in kind of feel. I really enjoyed it. Had a good time with it.
That kayaking part, right, makes me kind of think. Did you ever play Fire and Flood? Whatever, Through the Fire and the Flood?
The Flame of the Flood?
The Flame and the Flood, yeah. That kind of had a little bit of a similar kind of just moseying down a river type vibe. I don't know if you ever played that one. That's kind of what I was thinking of.
No, I don't think I've played that one, but I'll have to check it out.
It's very slow. I don't know. It's hard to recommend. But if you're in that kind of mood for a very slow one, it's a river journey kind of through a post-apocalyptic America but like not in a post-apocalyptic-y way. It's very, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I don't want to ruin too much, but
like kind of like the river section of Kentucky Route Zero.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
A little bit more like going on, I would say, but yeah.
Still need to play that game.
Kentucky Route Zero?
It's on my list, but I keep forgetting it exists, and then somebody mentions it. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to play that.
It's really good, and it's one of those games that like once you pick it up, it makes so much sense. Honestly.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm gonna have to put that one on. Maybe I'll play that one next.
I'll bite my tongue and say the first 4 acts are great.
Yeah.
Oh.
It took a little bit to get there, though. I mean, if you played it as it was coming out, it was definitely a different experience.
Yeah, I wish I had played it all in one go instead of playing it as it came out, because
I agree.
I started it in 2013, and I was like, this is fantastic, can't wait to play more. And that meme of the skeleton sitting in the lawn chair with the sunglasses and the bathing suit? That was me.
As somebody who is reading Kakegurui right now,
and
has been reading it since it started and has seen both seasons of the anime come and go. Yeah, I totally understand what you mean. Like we just now, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Yumiko's in this, isn't she? I wonder what she's up to, even though she's the main character. Yeah, so yeah.
I didn't know it took that turn because I never got around to like I've never read the manga, but I've never got around to watching Kakegurui Twin. I only
Uh,
watched Kakegurui and XX.
that one's about Mary.
Oh, okay.
It's good if you want insight into why she is the way she is, but I mean, you can also get that from the main comic too. So
I assume that everyone was the way they were in that show because they're just all perverts. Like
like
I don't need more depth than that.
I don't want to get too off track, but the most recent chapters of Kakegurui, like the past, I would say 7 or 8 chapters, are very, very illuminating because they finally get into what exactly Yumiko's deal is and what
Oh,
she's even doing at this school. It has taken over a year to get there, but it puts a lot of stuff into context. So if you want to start picking it back up and start reading it again, now is the time.
sounds good. I might actually go and pick up the manga. The only manga I'm following right now is Kaguya-sama, so yeah, I could always use something more to pass the time. Yeah, so that's Dordogne. Fantastic little indie game that I highly recommend if you are into that kind of thing. Uh, Quinley, what have you been playing?
So I've been playing and posting about Alan Wake 2,
Yeah.
which
Oh yeah.
is the long-awaited sequel. The first one came out in 2010, and uh, similar to kind of similar to I guess maybe Kentucky Route Zero, probably maybe I don't know. They seem to be in the same vein, but took that kind of Alan Wake was going to take that kind of episodic approach, like they did it for the first time. So like whenever a new quote unquote episode, they'd be like, next time on Alan Wake, and you're like, oh shit, next time, and then all of a sudden, and then the games came out all at once and kind of defeated the purpose of that. It's like next time on Alan Wake. It's like, when's it gonna come out? Oh, it's right here. Oh, okay, cool. Uh, but yeah, it's 13 years since the original game released.
And
I've
how long
I've
since
been
American Nightmare?
oh Jesus, American Nightmare.
I could look this up. I got Steam open.
I think like what American Nightmare came out what 2012?
Probably. American Nightmare. It came out. Yeah, you're exactly right. 22nd of May, 2012.
Okay, 2012. So yeah, so 13 years since the first one. However, I'm not good at math and it's early, so I'm not going to try. Uh, since 2012 for American Nightmare. I played it with my partner South this week. I played most of the saga segments. He played the Alan segments. Um, Easily might be my game of the year. Honestly, it might be. It is one. It is gorgeous. It is one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen. Uh, it is it is such a joy to look at. There's the atmosphere is on point. It has easily some of the best sound design and dynamic lighting. Like normally when you play a horror game and you get that little notification like at the beginning of the game where they're like for good atmosphere make sure to play with headphones. It's like fuck you, have confidence in your game. Don't tell me how to
Yeah,
play it.
you don't need to
This
make
game,
me scared.
yeah, like but Alan Wake does not tell you that, but you need to play this game with headphones just to fully appreciate the sound design. I did not because we just played it on the TV, but even then, like we had to mess with the levels of the sound a little bit, like because everything is set to 100 and it doesn't really quite work if you have it
Oh,
all
okay,
set to
yeah.
100. So like you have to turn like the music down. You're gonna have to turn the dialogue, frankly, all the way up, just because it's if you're playing it on a TV, they're very hard to hear, and you're gonna have to turn some of the sound effects down. Like I would say the sound effect to half, and then the background music to like maybe half the sound. But then we also had to like turn the TV up. But like once we, so it's a little finicky, so you're gonna have to mess with it a little bit. But once you do, like it sounded fantastic. Like uh and also like obviously because it's Alan Wake, and one of the main things about Alan Wake is the dark, and the dark and the light, and the eternal struggle they are locked in and whatnot. It has some of the best dynamic lighting I've ever seen. I
Wait,
think I mentioned this.
the dark
Huh?
and the light is. Are you telling me that Alan Wake is Kingdom Hearts?
Oh no, no,
You're right. Oh
don't
my
do that
god.
to me.
Oh my. Oh my god. You guys. No, but I can see Alan Wake's Keyblade in my mind's eye, and I hate that. Anyway,
Oh no!
like it's the wood like it's the lamp. It's the angel lamp. That's like the handle. Oh my god. Anyway, but yeah, the dynamic lighting is fantastic, and it is done in such a way that like I mentioned this before when I was posting on the avocado about it, but like it's one of those games where even when most of the lights are on, it's still very dark, but not so dark that it's pitch black, unless that's one of the segments of the game where the power goes out frequently in this game. You are going to be looking for fuses, or a game staple, playing the hits, find a fuse. um, but you'll be like the placement of all of the furniture and the clutter and the level design that looks fine in the light, and then when it's dark and you have a flashlight and you'll run past it, like one of them is like in one of the houses, there's like a banister along the stairs that's like decorative, and if you run past it, like when you're going down the stairs, the shadows move in such a way they're like, holy shit, is that a person? Oh, it's the banister thing. And
That's
like that's just
awesome.
one example, but that happens constantly, like over and over and over. There is so much, like there is nothing that is done like frivolously. Every single design choice in this game serves a distinct purpose, which is really fucking cool. The characterization and the acting is fantastic. Matthew Peretta is back as Alan, but only as his voice. The in the live action segments, he is played by a Finnish actor named, I forgot. Hold on. It's Iki Vilas or something. Hold on. Now I gotta look it up because I forgot. I
I
should have
do
been
like that
prepared.
they've been kind of doing these motion capture voice actor combos lately, and it does make
Yeah,
sense that if you get an iconic voice to stick with that, but also mocap
yeah.
somebody else. But man, it pulls off in Baldur's Gate, for example.
Oh yeah, Ika Willy. That's his name.
Okay.
So he's the live action. He's the one that Alan Wake is modeled after, and it's uh, it's really really cool the way they do it. I watched like one of the behind the scenes segments, and there's an interview with both Peretta and Ikavili, and they're talking about how like during that process, like Peretta would be doing, the voice lines for something, and then Ikavili might do something like while he's acting it out, and because he has to lip sync the lines essentially, and he may like give Peretta a suggestion like, hey, why don't you deliver the line like this, and how they just kind of that process fed back and in, back and forth between them, and you can really see like how well that works because I'll be honest, I forgot what Matthew Peretta looked like. So when the game came out and they showed Alan, I'm like, I don't remember Matthew Peretta being that tall, but okay. But it's like, oh, they're literally played by two different people, so that's fantastic.
It's really neat.
Argu- yeah, it's really really cool. Arguably my favorite thing about the game is also kind of the one complaint I have about it, and that's that you have to have played Alan Wake, you have to have played American Nightmare, and you have to have played Control for the plot to make any
Ooh,
sense.
okay.
And, like, yeah, it's a sequel. It says Alan Wake 2, so like, and the
Yeah,
remaster.
American Nightmare though is kind of a little
Yeah,
rough, I think.
yeah, but you have to play it to understand what's going with scratches, because Scratch doesn't really come up in Alan Wake the original until like the very end. Um, so like I'm normally not a fan of that, but also this game does also seem to be something of a thank you from Remedy to its fans for sticking with it all these years, because if you've played all of Remedy's games, there is something in this game from you, and that includes Max Payne. Some behind-the-scenes stuff. They wanted to bring Max Payne back for this game. They wanted Max Payne to be in it, but Rockstar would not let them because Rockstar owns the rights to him. But I also like to think that Rockstar was just like, you know what, you've put him through enough. Just,
Yeah.
no. Max Payne is now in Mexico enjoying his $100 million in cash. Like, let him rest. But they do have like a stand-in character for Max Payne, and you can tell it's him because him and Max Payne have the same tie. And you're like,
that's
Oh, okay. I thought the stand-in would be like Saga's partner, who is also modeled by Sam Lake.
So yes, that's correct. His Alex Casey is in universe. Alex Casey, and this was the case in the first game too. Alex Casey is a character that starts out as one of the characters that Alan Wake is like known for writing, and he's very clearly a parody of Max Payne.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, and so Saga's partner, Alex Casey, is a real person, and I don't want to get too much spoilers, but like, he's like Max Payne if Max Payne were slightly more well-adjusted. The next fight, and he does still drink, but it's not a problem. He's not popping Vicodin pills every 5 seconds or anything. Like, it's like if Max Payne had friends, basically. It's very cool.
That's awesome.
That's
Very
great.
cool. I love that. Speaking of Sam Lake being in the game, I'm sure. Are y'all playing Spider-Man? The Spider-Man
No.
game?
No, sorry, I don't own a PS5.
I'm not playing it either because I don't give a shit about Spider-Man. But, no offense to anybody who does. I don't care. But there were a bunch of dipshits on Reddit complaining about how Mary Jane in the new Spider-Man looks quote unquote too normal. Because supposedly she was modeled after one of the writers, which to my knowledge that is objectively false. Like, she's not, but she just looks like a normal human person, and it's like, thank God, a normal person.
I saw this, like, I saw a YouTube thumbnail about this, and I was like, I know I don't want to watch this.
Yeah.
The
Too bad
funny
it's getting
thing is-
recommended for you.
Like, why are you recommending this to me? Do you even know who I am? Sorry, go ahead.
So the funny thing about this and why it relates to Alan Wake is they were complaining about this, and someone else points out, it's like, okay, well, Sam Lake does the same thing in Alan Wake, and he's in the game. He's just a normal dude. And their response to that was, yeah, but Sam Lake is actually hot, though. Which I'm like, while objectively correct on the merits, you're still making this argument in bad faith.
Yeah.
Like, no, Sam Lake is objectively hot. We all know this. But still,
I think
that's
they're
not-
just revealing something about themselves.
I know. It's
Which,
it-
like,
they just
you know,
said, like,
more
oh,
power to them. I hope they can, like, actualize their own internal truth at some point.
I hope so too. But yeah, like this, it is a wonderful game. It is scary. It is deep, dark fears kind of scary. It's very disturbing. It's a very, for lack of a better way to put it, it's a very adult kind of scary. It does have jump scares, which I don't like generally. I think they're cheap, but they are limited to specific segments of the game. So after the first chapter, you'll start to recognize, like, okay, we're in jump scare territory, so they're going to start popping up eventually. But yeah, Alan Wake 2, fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, a lot of people are kind of in the same mode. It's interesting to see how this kind of I don't know if it came out of nowhere, but a lot of people have been waiting forever for this, and then when it finally hits and it's as good as it's been, it's interesting to see a lot of the excitement around it.
Yeah. It's, oh man, I would say, like, play Control, because Control does have an Alan Wake centered DLC. It's called Altered World Event, but everybody called it the Alan Wake expansion because that's basically what it was, and that kind of gives a little bit of info. But yeah, that's the one unfortunate thing is you kind of have to play Alan Wake and American Nightmare and Control to really understand what's going on, or you can just watch a long play. That's always an option too. You'll get the same thing out of it.
I played Control, but I never played the DLC. I should probably go back and do that at some point, just to get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah, Foundation is good. AWE is good. Yeah, go back and do that.
For sure. Kappa, what have you been playing?
Oh man, I got two. This one, sometimes there's this is going to be in the game of the year conversation for everybody, and sometimes it's like this is just going to be in the game of the year conversation for me, right? And I've been playing Return to Moria, the new Lord of the Rings Minecraft game. It kind of splits the difference, maybe like exploration RPG.
Yeah.
And I'm loving it, and it's at that price point I would call firmly in that double A. I think it's $39.99 new, which used to be $29.99. So you're kind of at least at that price point in my head, you know what you're getting there, right? But I am loving it. It's got a lot of shine to it. Very, very well polished. Pretty cool crafting system. Dwarves look cool. They sound cool. When you're like mining ore, you sing. I think that's really cool. And you just kind of slowly develop in the world, and you're basically you're isolated from the rest of the expedition that's there to take back Moria. As you kind of mine your way solo or with 8-player co-op.
Wow.
Yeah, that had me perked up because that's almost a small Minecraft server, and I do really love those types of co-op games. So I got this for my older son. He's been playing with me here and there, but I'm telling him about the lore of the dwarfs. Very lore heavy. In parts, they actually got Jonathan Rhys Meyers to do the voice, and it starts with something
Rhys Davies.
Jonathan Rhys Davies,
yeah, John Rhys Davies. Yeah, Jonathan Rhys Meyers is the young hot one.
One of the things I like is how it starts. It basically is Gimli saying, "Yeah, we're tired of everybody else telling our stories. We're going to tell a dwarf story now." From the dwarf perspective instead of hobbits telling about what dwarves did. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a little dig, but I liked it,
A little dig?
Yeah, there you go. But overall, very, very comprehensive exploration RPG. That's kind of how I describe it. It feels like I used to play this game a lot, and tying it to Minecraft probably isn't the best thing to do, honestly. But those kind of games where you would just like, okay, well, I've got to build this to build this to build this. Maybe Metroidvania-ish, not necessarily full on, but you're kind of in that vein where another vein. You're kind of there where you feel like you're making the progress through what you've been mining and what you've been finding, and I really like that. I thought that's a cool way to do it.
So it's like authored content, not procedurally generated.
Right. It might be a little bit procedural. It's hard for me to tell because they do have world seeds. But
okay.
I've been playing my own world. I've played 3 or 4 dwarfs, and at least I would say the vast majority of it is layered, right? So that you have to do certain things to get to certain things. The procedural content might come, through, hey, this room might have this statue, or it might have this ore, or it might not, but generally speaking, it's all there.
So, sorry to interrupt. So,
yeah, no,
I'm looking because I hadn't heard of this. I'm not really super into Lord of the Rings, but something that's catching my eye. It looks like there seems to be a divide between what reviewers think of the game and what fans think of the game. Like, is that something that sounds?
A little bit. It's tough with Lord of the Rings because I think a lot of people get hung up on Peter Jackson's version of Lord of the Rings and don't give it a lot of breathing room to stuff like Lord of the Rings Online, which I'm personally in love with, or like kind of any of those games where you're not basically playing as Orlando Bloom, and like all the rest of them. It doesn't feel bad to me to to deal with that. But I what I look for more for Lord of the Rings is it does it care about the lore? Is it trying to get it right? You know, and I think there's a nice middle ground, and I really enjoyed the story it was telling, which is um, the loss of Moria through Durin's hubris, basically, um, which is good. I mean that's it's a very basic story, but then you've got the whole background of like because of this, the dwarfs have been paying the price ever since, and have no homes more or less. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure which side of it the fans are on and which side the critics are on. I feel like for the critics, they're probably pretty negative on this game because it's pretty simplistic.
I'm seeing like a lot of complaints about it being too linear, given that the genre is like survival crafting, which on the one hand, okay, but on the other hand, it's a mine.
Right. Yeah.
Have you been in a mine?
Yeah, exactly. Like it would feel weirder to me if instead of like getting like a natural progression as you go further down and closer to where Durin's Bane came from, it would feel weirder to me if like, oh, I mine Mithril on my first hit, like how random Minecraft can be. I know that there's a sandbox mode and stuff like that. I just haven't messed with it. But no, I don't necessarily think that. I don't think of this as a straight up survival type game where you're kind of like messing with the environment and trying to build your way out. It's more of an exploration game to me, where the making the steel hammer allows you to get to the next level so that you can explore that level. But the impetus is exploration. It's not crafting or anything like that. The impetus is, hey, let's let's see what else is in this this mine, basically. But no, I think that the people who really are going to enjoy it are going to not be in it so much for the for like the hardcore like mat material gathering and making, and more to get a good story and then some light exploration type deal. But this game kind of existed for a long time, this style of game. I don't know what I would call it. It's akin to Metroidvania, but I'm thinking about stuff like what was that Joe Mad game? I want to say Deathstalkers. It's not Deathstalkers. It's one where you play as like the Four Horsemen.
Darksiders.
Darksiders, that's it. Yeah. Kind of where it's like, okay, you unlock this gun that lets you go to this area, and then you kill a couple things in there, and it's kind of more akin to that than I would just say, Minecraft.
Okay, so like Darksiders, because I played the first one, I didn't play the other two, but the first one very much reminded me of the first three, maybe the fourth one. I didn't play the fourth one, but the first three God of War games were very much like that. So it's more in kind of old school early aughts open adventure game ish, or not quite open. Feels open, but
open, but you definitely start, if you really start to dig in, you start to see the the trail under your legs. But no, I think that's probably why it felt so comfortable to me, because I'm very familiar with that style of game, basically, because it's what I grew up playing. The Legacy of Kain games, I think that'd be another good example. That style of game, and that's what this felt like more to me than anything. So you're in there mining, but you're not mining every rock you come across trying to find the perfect sword or whatever. It's much more about getting from place to place. The other game I played is Wartales. Yeah, man, I'm all over the place on that game. Maybe I'll talk about it next one, but I don't know. I don't know if I like it or not. I go back and forth every time I load it. Sometimes you load a game and you just look at it, you're like, ugh.
Why did I buy this?
Yeah, and then it's Game Pass, so I don't feel too bad. But yeah, definitely like there's some times where I go to like load it up and I'm like, this game, what did I do? What am I doing here? But yeah, it's I don't hate it. I've got up and down. I want to kind of maybe give it one or two more areas before I figure out what I really think on it. But I'm not sure if anybody else has played that one.
It's the same devs who did Dune Spice Wars, right?
Is it?
Yeah,
that wouldn't surprise me.
Zero Games.
That doesn't surprise me.
They also did Northgard and something called Darksburg.
Or that's interesting because I did like Northgard. I did enjoy that game.
Oh, they did Evoland. Okay.
Yeah. They're kind of a quirky developer. Wartales it leans more into the serious, but there's definitely some quirk going on there. I'm liking it more than I thought I would, but I really there's some overworld map annoyances that I'm really kind of beating my head against. I think if you've experienced it, you'd understand it, but it's kind of one of those.
This is a top-down open-world RPG, correct?
Kind of, yes. So you play as this you play as this like band of friends going around trying to solve problems, mostly by killing things with swords.
That kind of game.
Yeah. You're not gonna like find out like a peace process or anything. So, but you go through these places and then you have to like make adjustments based on the area. There's a lot of like trade items. There's a ton of little weird crafting things. You have to feed your army. You have to repair your weapons. You have to recruit things. What I'm digging though is the actual combat, which feels a lot to me like Final Fantasy Tactics. It's a turn-based, everybody's got a job. Everybody's got a skill. That's the part I'm really digging. It's everything else in the game that I'm kind of bouncing off. So I feel like I can't really be fair until I give it a little bit more time. But yeah, so far kind of mixed on it.
Interesting. So there's one other game that I've been playing that I'm just going to briefly discuss, which is the new Super Mario game, Super Mario Brothers Wonder. I'm a little over halfway through it, I think, at this point. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. So I think we've all played a Mario game before. We all kind of know what the deal is. This is a Mario game. There's not much more to it than that. But I will say, I don't think this game actually puts its best foot forward.
Yeah, I've heard that.
That's surprising because I have heard the opposite. I've heard nothing but good things. So I'm curious to see what makes you think that.
So
yeah.
My input is coming from my kids who are kind of more frustrated with it than I thought they would be. But yeah, I don't know. What are you thinking, Merve?
So what I'm thinking is, like, I will say when I say it doesn't put its best foot forward, I mean that it gets a lot better. But the first couple of worlds it just feels like Nintendo forgot how to be Nintendo for a little bit. It starts off way too gimmicky. It has all these like cool level design ideas, but just doesn't build on them. It just throws out an idea and then it's gone. So nothing ever builds on top of anything else. And it doesn't really teach players how to deal with these mechanics. It just throws them kind of at you at kind of intermediate difficulty and doesn't develop them harder or doesn't teach you how to use them. So it doesn't ramp anything up. And those are the first two worlds where you think you should be introducing things and then slowly ramping them up.
Mm-hmm. Which is a very classic Nintendo method to use.
Yeah, that is like pretty much their design philosophy across most of their games. And they don't really go back to that design philosophy until maybe the third world. And then after that, it's like, okay, this is a classic Nintendo game, just gussied up and made to look really pretty for the year 2023, where they develop course elements across kind of introductory courses in the world, and then they mix and match them. They make them more complicated as you go through the world. So it kind of teaches you how to interact with these things, and it teaches you about all the cool things you can do with these mechanics and course elements, which I wish they'd put in the first two worlds. So I'm enjoying it a lot more than when I started. When I started, I was just like, I don't think this is very good. But now, as I'm going through it, I'm in the 5th or 6th world now. It's a lot more like what I was expecting, what the critics were saying about the game.
That's a choice to do it that way. Like, is there any like indication as to why the first two worlds, like, does it feel like the first two worlds are almost like a different game, like they're their own kind of standalone thing, and then like by the time you get to the third world, then it feels cohesive. Like that seems like a strange way to start a game.
So it feels artistically and mechanically very much of a piece with the rest of the game. Just in its approach to level design and progression and pacing, it feels very un-Nintendo. It felt almost like some of the levels in the early going, they were so gimmicky, it felt like I was playing like the greatest hits from Super Mario Maker.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's not a good feel.
Yeah.
You don't want it to ever feel that,
Yeah.
There's some great user-created levels in Super Mario Maker.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. It's just like, and I had a lot of fun playing the best user-created levels from that game. But when I sit down to play a Nintendo platformer made by Nintendo, I want the levels to feel...
Yeah, you want the polish.
Yeah, like Nintendo. Exactly. I want that polish. I want that particular approach to level design. So I think my guess as to why the initial going is the way it is, I'm guessing when they play tested it, the feedback they probably got was that it was too easy and too tutorializing in the early going. So they probably backed off that. And I think they really, really wanted to show off the Wonder Flower gimmicks. So to explain how this game is set up, every major level, I should say, has a level gimmick that's usually a hidden secret called a Wonder Flower. And when Mario grabs a Wonder Flower, or Peach or Daisy or Luigi or Two Toads or Toadette grabs this Wonder Flower, it transforms how the level works and completely changes the mechanics of the game. So, for instance, you might grab a Wonder Flower and then you'll see a targeting reticle on screen and Bowser's trying to kill you with a giant laser cannon. Or gravity might get reversed. Or there might be a stampede of enemies across the screen that you have to ride. And I've given away 3 of them. There are so many of these that I don't feel like I've really given away the game. These can range feeling really, really cool to just kind of silly and gimmicky. I'd liken it a bit to, it's like, you guys know the sitcom Community. It's like Community as a video game. Some of the gimmicks work and some of them just don't.
Okay. That's a way to describe it, I guess.
Yeah. So overall, though, now that I've gotten into the rhythm of things, and now that the game seems to have kind of recaptured that Nintendo approach to design, I'm enjoying it a lot more. You just kind of have to slog through the first world and part of the second to get there, unfortunately. And I will say the other criticism I'll make is Nintendo just needs to let go of some of the archaic elements of these platformers. Like that whole control scheme where you control running and jumping with a single thumb and you move your thumb between the Y and the B button. Kind of like you press it with you press both buttons with the same thumb at the same time.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, we have so many buttons on controllers now. It just doesn't need to be like that. And I understand it's a holdover from the old games. It's archaic. We don't need it like this.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing, like, and I mean, y'all have probably heard me complain about the Switch controls in general and how you cannot remap controls without going into the settings. So is it kind of similar to that? Because like that's what it feels like, and it's only with Nintendo like first party Nintendo titles on the Switch. Like they're the only ones that don't allow you to do that. Most other games like on the Switch, because they're cross-platform, they allow you to remap the controls. Like, do you think that like not letting people remap the controls and kind of forcing them to use this archaic control scheme, like do you think that's just a Nintendo design philosophy thing, or is that them being lazy and not wanting to change it?
So the funny thing about Wonder is that it actually does have some control remapping options. There are different control schemes available for things like you can control ground if you want ground pound on just the thumbstick, or if you want to press a button to ground pound, or if you want both, you can activate that. And they have a whole bunch of other control options. Like there's some where they're like, do you want jump on, I think it's you can switch between YB and AX. So they have some control options. It's just not full remapping. And I think it's because they're really, really beholden to that single thumb scheme for jump, grab, run.
That reminds me back to Wii, and the waggle controversy, right? Yeah. Hey, this is annoying, but we've got to use it. You've got to use it because it's all we've got right now.
The motion controls, at least in Wonder, are optional. You can turn them on or off, so I think I turned them off.
Part of me feels like that Nintendo isn't going to be able to continue to do this for much longer, just because of how we're seeing this big push for accessibility in video games, especially in regards to control schemes. I think that if Nintendo wants to stay not just ahead of the pack, but just in line with the rest of the industry, that's gonna have to change at some point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Accessibility is something that everybody's discussing right now, and it's just if you're not gonna have it, you can't explain why. Hey, we just don't have accessibility in our game. Well, no.
Yeah. Especially when the big AAA titles are doing it. That was something that Alan Wake has. They have specific color scheme settings for different kinds of color blindness and stuff, which was really cool. So many games have that stuff now. And I know, unfortunately, part of why Nintendo doesn't do that, and it's the same reason that, unfortunately, a lot of Japanese companies don't do it, and it's because Japan does not have a good track record with the disabled community. They just don't.
I think some of it too is we don't want to, they consider it almost more of an art, where I can't compromise it by doing this. There's always that feeling of well, you're not really compromising, you're just letting more people play it.
You're just letting more people see your art. You want more people to see the art, yes, and they're like, no. Oh, okay. I don't know.
Yeah, it just feels like the thing about Wonder, and why I think it's that it's almost dogmatic at this point, is that they've clearly made concessions for accessibility in so many other ways in this game that I think this is just one piece of dogma that they're unwilling to let go of for reasons that are completely beyond me, other than, I don't know, maybe they like giving people carpal tunnel. What do I know? But yeah, otherwise, enjoying. Accessibility concerns notwithstanding, I'm enjoying Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Not really a Game of the Year contender for me, but honestly, sometimes just playing a good game is good enough. So
yeah.
All right. Quinley, is there anything else you've been playing, or shall we move on to discussing Layoffs?
I started playing because I completely forgot it came out. Atelier Ryza 3 yesterday. It's an Atelier.
Oh yeah.
There's
I completely forgot it came out.
Yeah, it's an Atelier game. You run around, you grab stuff, craft. Something I do find interesting about it is that they made some minor tweaks to the controls. One of the things about it is her sprint is incredibly fast. Weirdly fast almost. And also her sprint, if you're sprinting and you grab stuff, she doesn't do, normally there's an animation where she'll stop and pick something up, but now it's more Breath of the Wild. Well, she'll just pick it up as she's running. Her animation is she'll sprint and then she'll reach out her arm and grab at the air and it'll pick it up. So that's pretty cool, I guess. I just started it, so I don't really have a whole lot to say about it, but I do like it. It's pretty, so it's nice.
So is it a lot different in other regards? I mean, you're not that far in it, but is it a lot different in other regards than the previous two Atelier Ryza games, or?
Honestly, no. It's so I think part of what's worth noting about the Atelier series, if you're kind of unfamiliar with it, is that they do everything in trilogies, and so when they start a trilogy, they kind of, the first game in that trilogy is kind of what determines what the mechanics are going to be, what the gimmicks are going to be. So they don't really change all that much from game to game. Like the core gameplay loop, the core game mechanics, most of that stays the same. They don't really do anything with it. The only thing that really changes is like the location, maybe the characters. It expands on the story. Maybe it's a little more polished, depending on how much money the last game made. Ryza, the other thing about these games is that like Gust has gone on record basically saying that the Atelier game is what keeps their lights on, and Ryza being as successful as it is, I can understand not wanting to change too much. Just so
that makes sense, because they do, like, they also did Blue Reflection, right?
Oh, they did Blue Reflection, my beloved. Oh, I love Blue Reflection so much.
It doesn't sound like that made them a lot of money compared to Atelier.
No, and it's weird because the way that they rolled it out as this, at least not with the first game, but with the second one, they rolled it out as this big media mix thing. It had an anime, it had a mobile game, it has, and then it had the actual PlayStation game. So it was almost like they expected it to make a lot of money, and then the anime came out, and I personally like it, but ooh, off model day one. Like, it's just like, look, I don't know how you're supposed to look, but I know it's not like that. It's just it just looked surprisingly cheap, and also just it seemed like nobody watched it. And it was like, I don't know what it was Gust was, or Koei Tecmo, maybe, I don't know, maybe the decision was out of their hands, but like, I don't, for a game that people had barely heard of, even in Japan, I'm not exactly sure what they were expecting.
This kind of also happened with Scarlet Nexus, where the anime just didn't hit big at all, and they were expecting a huge multimedia push. At least there they're able to synchronize the anime and the game. Then there's Sin Duality, which was supposed to come out this year. The anime was ready, the game was not. So the game got pushed to next year, and so that multimedia push isn't going to work out. It kind of sucks when these things backfire, unfortunately, because you want good things, but
yeah. And what's and again, I'll try to keep this as short as I can, because the thing is, the mobile game came out this year, and it's a gacha pull game, and like, okay, whatever. Like, Gus needs to make money. They need to keep their lights on. If a gacha pull game helps them do that, okay. But the big controversy, because the mobile game, by all accounts, is doing incredibly well, but the controversy among fans of the original games is that the main character is a boy. It's an average high school boy, and up until this point,
no,
have been no men in the game. None. Like, this game, like, one of the things that people love about this game is that it is how female focused it is. And like, in every sense of word, like, it is a game about mothers and daughters, it's a game about sisters, it's a game about friends, it is a game and a story about the specific ways that, I guess I'll say female presenting people, since there's not too much gender stuff, but it is a game about the specific ways that people, female friendships, the way they love and support each other, but also the way, especially in the anime, the very specific ways in which women hurt each other and dislike each other. And I feel like that is something that does not get as much focus, and that is something that people absolutely love about the game. They don't have to worry, like, it passes the Bedshell test in many ways. They don't have to worry about them, like, worrying over boys, or a boy coming in and, blowing up the friendship, or, what have you. And then the mobile game comes out, and they're like, here's the reveal of the main character, and it's some kid in a tie, and you're like, ah, shit, here we go.
Yeah.
Does it have, like, the standard, like, harem protagonist face and haircut?
You can look him up. Just do blue reflection. It's blue reflection sun. Look up blue reflection sun protagonist. You will see exactly what I mean.
The autocomplete is blue reflection sun male protagonist.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a less bad case of protagonist face than I thought. It could be so much worse. If you ever want like the worst a case of male harem protagonist face, look up the protagonist of Hajime no Garu, or like My First Girlfriend is a Gal. Look up that guy.
Oh,
Oh, you know what I'm talking about. Fantastic. That's exactly the reaction I thought I was going to get.
But yeah, anyway, that's why they're like, so yeah, like when Atelier does their trilogies, like once they have the game mechanics and the gameplay loop set, the only thing that really changes is story, the location. They may add some characters to it, like to freshen it up. Like usually, generally, each entry in the trilogy will have more and more characters, and the graphics will improve, generally speaking, so it'll be prettier. Everybody gets new updates. But as far as the core gameplay loop, it's not that different. So like if you played the first Atelier Ryza, you'll be able to play this one. It's fine. Like it's the same. Like if you liked that one, you'll like this one. And that's something that has worked for Gust in terms of this series. I do want to play the remake they did of the very first Atelier game, because it was never released in the West, and that recently came out as well. So maybe I'll play that at some point, and maybe I'll have more to say about it, because it's the very first one, the one that started it all. Maybe it's the one that let them buy lights to keep on in the first place. So, but yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Let us now move on to discussing what is going on in the games industry, specifically recent layoffs at Bungie and some other studios. But let's start by framing this in terms of what's been happening at Bungie lately. So I think as of this recording, I think it was this past week, Bungie laid off roughly 8% of its workforce, and delayed the final expansion for the current story arc of Destiny 2, called The Final Shape, by several months later into 2024. Apparently, this was brought about by Bungie missing their internal revenue targets by 45%, which sounds like a huge misprediction. I don't know.
I am curious as to how realistic those revenue targets were to begin with, right? Because that's a huge margin.
Yeah, that's gigantic. That's like people do get fired when you miss it by that much.
Yeah.
My understanding is that they were not out to lunch with these predictions. They were rosy, but not ridiculous.
Oh,
is my understanding.
Now, I can only really kind of fill in the gaps as a player, and I don't know the behind the scenes. Nobody, I don't think, really does. But I do think there's a little bit of Sony buying them, I think, almost by overvaluing them, kind of set them up a little bit to fail, right? Because now...
They did say that the Sony purchase didn't really have anything to do with it, because a lot of the stuff that was going on that led up to this was in place before the Sony purchase, I think.
Right. I think that the thing that Sony had to do with it is that they valued the company at $4.6 billion, which is a lot. And I think there's a potential all of a sudden that you have to start delivering those types of numbers that were a little more optimistic than maybe other places should have been, right? And then that's maybe why you're starting to see 45% valuation over, because you're trying to all of a sudden show to Sony, hey, yeah, we were worth $4.6 billion, right? Which I don't know if that's, nobody knows, but that's kind of what a lot of the back and forth has been. Really, it's been more about the executives, honestly, saying like, we screwed this up, and less that the game hasn't been...
Sorry, go ahead, Quinley.
But they forewent their bonuses
wow.
to fix it. Anyway, sorry.
So I think the thing that I think most people are kind of seeing and feeling about Destiny is for a while now. There's this leaked presentation. I don't know how much of it is true, but it was basically, hey, we don't want to try too hard. We want to deliver kind of a minimal value product, right? To kind of keep people on tap, basically, to keep them hungry, to keep them wanting the drip of what we're giving them. And this was kind of came to a head when the community saying, hey, there's no PvP maps, there's no new this, there's no new that. And they kind of came out and said, oh, this is hard. Like, the game dev is hard. And people were like, yes, that's fair. You know, but I don't know. It's kind of weird.
I think part of the problem. Sorry, go ahead.
I think what the player base is saying is, if we're supposed to expect the minimum value product, we're not going to buy and pre-order like we have been, where Destiny is consuming our life, because I don't know what season to season I'm going to get. Is it the minimum value season, or am I getting the full Witch Queen, everything is amazing $60 expansion? And that's the hard thing. So I think you've kind of angered the player base a little bit, and now it's up. There was an interesting quote that it's not that the devs have screwed it up with the player base, it's that the executives, they've made us think that this game is maybe not going to be around as long as you might have thought, and because of that, we're going to give you what we can, and we're going to milk it, and the milking feels worse than anything else.
One thing I will say about Destiny 2 in particular is that it doesn't really have an onboarding process for new players anymore. So they're effectively stuck selling to the clientele they already have. Yes. And if you piss off that clientele, you're just losing players with no means of replacing them. And so I can see why, if you piss off players a lot, like what happened with Lightfall, then 45% revenue drop kind of makes sense.
And I think you're seeing this now with WoW especially, and WoW is basically rebooting itself because of that, right? And I think that's more where Destiny needs to start thinking. Maybe not just yet with the Destiny 3, because they got to dig themselves out a little bit first. But yeah, over time they were going to have to figure out how to make this work again, because right now it's just not there. And you've got an angry player base. You've got executives that are kind of pointing the blame fingers at long time employees. I mean, Michael Salvatore getting fired is devastating. He's basically who took over from Marty O'Donnell, and even at the worst of times, no one would ever knock Destiny's music, basically. So it's very odd that you're kind of just seeing this weird excuse, minimum value product stuff being trotted out when everybody's just as frustrated as possible.
That's man.
Sorry, go ahead, Quinley.
Oh, so like the thing about like the executive thing, something that like I have a couple thoughts. Like Sal, my partner, he's a programmer, so he kind of has some insight like into kind of what's going on in the tech industry in terms of trends and stuff. And I think something he mentioned the other day stuck with me. He mentioned seeing a post on Reddit or something. I think it's been removed, but it was talking about how the current managerial and executive class in the tech industry doesn't know how to code. And not only do they not know how to code, they have no familiarization with a development process. So they don't understand how long a feature takes to implement. They don't understand how long it may take to do bug testing. Like, a bug testing cycle may take a really short amount of time, but they still have all these bugs. But, the only reason it took such a short amount of time and they were able to quote unquote do so many is because they did all the easy ones first, right?
Right.
Like, just things like that. So they do not have a firm understanding of how development cycles work and how long it takes, how much manpower you need to really get a project out the door, but they're still being hired to manage these projects. And that is something that I think is, I mean, it's happening in pretty much every industry right now, is that, you're getting a bunch of people, with, managerial and project managing experience, but they don't know anything about the industry that they are in. They don't have any familiarity with the norms. And that's why you get shit like the Unity debacle earlier this year. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, and why did you think that was a good idea? But it's also, like with the tech industry specifically, the thing that is so striking about the fact that you're getting a current managerial class that doesn't know how to code is that for a long time it wasn't that way, because of how like niche and specialized a lot of the tech industry was. Like if you were in there, you just basically made your way up and you knew how to code, and you had a fundamental understanding of how everything was supposed to work. And it's just not like that anymore.
I'd have to see what Bungie's C-suite or their executive managerial section looks like, because my understanding is that a lot of them actually did make their way up through the trenches, and maybe it's just been so long that they've forgotten what it was like back then.
Yeah,
back in the 90s when they were like coding up Marathon.
Yeah, it's definitely happened before with other studios where Blizzard, for example. I think it's funny because I think 5 or 6 months ago I was like, Blizzard, BioWare, Bethesda, and Bungie are all kind of falling apart at the same time, and I was so right.
Oh my god, BioWare! Oh my god, Dreadwolf is never going to see the light of day. I'm just going to go ahead and say that.
So make or break too for them if it does.
Jesus. Like the other thing is that I think as far as what's happening to the industry, it's kind of the same thing that's running roughshod over everything we know and love, and it's financial capitalism. And I think an interesting microcosm of what is happening in the industry is the recent release of Silent Hill Ascension, which was a fucking shit show because it was marketed as this multi kind of media event where it was a choose your own. They marketed it, I think, as like a kind of telltale game that like a whole bunch of people could get into a chat, watch at the same time. It'd be streamed live, and they could, vote on how the game proceeds. And
so like Telltale plus democracy, basically.
Yeah, and people went into it thinking that's what it was, when what it actually is just essentially what Kappa mentioned earlier. It's a Silent Hill digital autonomous organization where, yes, you can participate for free, but your vote isn't going to have any weight because you need to have influence points, which can only be grinded out by doing mini games in I think a different window or something, and you don't get that many, and you only have access to 2 of I think the 6 mini games, and the only way to get access to the other 4 mini games is if you buy a fucking battle pass for $20. And then the other thing, the chat for the first episode was unmoderated. So you got a whole bunch of people just kind of saying any old thing in there, and they eventually had to disable it because people kept typing Kojima come over and over again. And then, even then, even though they disabled the chat, if you paid for the battle pass, you can still be in the chat. You can still. Yeah. So they took something that was essentially useless, like why the fuck would you buy that? And then they gave it they retroactively gave it a privilege to it. And then
it kind of feels like this really is a microcosm of American democracy, where billionaires can just scream whatever the hell they want on, I guess it's called X now. That's basically what this is. It's like people shelling out money for the privilege of being Elon Musk.
Yeah, or just shelling out money just for. And the other thing about the Telltale is I've never played a Telltale game, but my understanding is that it's almost like a visual novel in that there are choices that you make multiple regular points throughout the game, whereas with Ascension, you only make a choice at the end of the show.
Okay,
Like,
so it's like that now shuttered Disney ride where you chose your ending by vote.
yeah, yeah. And
Okay.
like, I think something that, like, to give an idea, I guess, to, you know, younger listeners, if we have any, um, like, is
If you're
to an
under 18, why don't listen to this podcast?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
But I think a really interesting thing just to kind of think of how far video games have come, because I mean, all things considered, video games is still a very young industry compared to other sectors of the entertainment industry. But the thing I think of, weirdly enough, is video game advertisements in the 90s is a really good example of just how far removed financial capitalist ideas were from video games compared to now. Because you look at magazine ads for games in the 90s and early 2000s, and you get the impression that these ad agencies knew what video games were, but not why people like to play them. They're just like, I don't know, it makes money, I guess. So they just kind of put anything out there and they're like, hey, buy it. I don't know. Like, there was nothing about the actual game, because, like, they hadn't played the game. They didn't know what the game was about. Like, I think of the Shenmue ads on TV, like, which, do y'all remember the Shenmue ads?
No, I think I was a little too young for that.
Yeah, they made it look like a kung fu movie or something.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's like, he's like, isn't that right? And then whatever the name of the main character is, the female character, and then you hear another woman's voice go, like, it's like, who's whatever the girl's name is, and then you look at it, and apparently the whole narration that's been happening over the commercial is a dude thinking about Shenmue while fucking, and you're like, what? Like, that has nothing to do with the game, like, in any meaningful way. But that's how video games were treated. Is they were treated as this thing that is making money, but nobody knew why it was making money. It was too niche to be like something outside of like the stuff for kids. Like, it was too niche for it to really take a foothold. And now, you know, video games have gotten to the point where it's this huge multi-billion-dollar industry. Like, it is in the cultural zeitgeist. We are getting adaptations of it, and then you have all these companies, like mobile game companies and stuff, out here putting dark patterns in their shit and hiring psychologists that specialize in addiction, like, to help keep people hooked into their game, like with loot boxes and shit, like all the NBA, like whenever a fucking 2K game comes out, there's always some news story about a scandal about loot boxes and stuff. Like, that's what's happening. It's just,
and this was the most like notable thing about a 2K game was frequency vibrations. But yeah, other than that, what I will say on this is that, like, where is it going with this? When you've got like video game ads from the 90s and the early 2000s, I think what a lot of executives and marketing folks were seeing was data that were saying, okay, we've got like a proportion more, teenage boys playing this than, say, teenage girls. Like, maybe their data are showing 60-40 or what have you. And they're like, okay, so we're really going to zero in on teenage boys, and we're going to, like, market the hell out of this to them and their, presumably hetero sensibilities, and really lean in on that. And that became gaming culture. Like, completely neglecting that all the women who were playing games, all the girls were playing games, and all the people who are not straight playing games. And it's only recently that we seem to have come around to the understanding of, okay, if it's split 60-40, you're still not reaching 40% of that audience if you're marketing games in that particular way. And I think the medium kind of caught up to that before marketing did. So there's this really awkward time in especially the early 2010s, where it seemed like gaming had moved on, but the marketing for those games had not, and it created this like really awkward juxtaposition.
Yeah.
and I think, like, Gamergate, while not like that's not specifically where it came from, I think Gamergate, like coming out of that era, like is significant, right? Because
It kind of is the last gasp of that era that
yeah,
you have this movement that latched onto something that, let's be frank, was actually completely unrelated to all these issues,
yeah,
and then co-opted it and turned it into this almost rebellion against feminist analysis in video games and the acknowledgement that women were a significant portion of the gaming public. And it was, in some sense, a last gasp of those ideas. And I mean, it still lingers in discourse and in certain discords, if you will. But I'm glad that the culture as a whole seems to have, to some extent, moved on from that, at least.
yeah. And I mean, like that's on the one hand, it's kind of like, you know, that is kind of like with any kind of niche subculture or hobby, that's just kind of one of the growing pains of becoming mainstream, right? Like that's one of the steps you kind of have to go through. um and like, yeah, okay, that's fair, but then the next step is where we are now, where everything, now that, you know, now that we have everybody on board, now that everybody is included, we can now focus on getting all of their money.
Yeah.
So it is now become, instead of a duty to the audience, it is now all duty to the shareholders. And like you mentioned, Kappa, with Sony, you know, purchasing Bungie and overvaluing them, like that's what they're focused on. They're not focused on the players as much, because, you know, even though they should be, because, you know, the players are the ones that are going to be giving them that money, you'd think. But
one thing too, especially with Sony, is if you remember, their purchase of Bungie really wasn't about Bungie themselves. It was about their knowledge of how to be the one company that's making games as a service work, right?
yeah,
And supposedly Sony was going to do, what was it, Merv, like 12?
Yep,
12
12 live
gas
service
games.
games.
Yeah. And like one by one, they kind of fell apart. And then it ended up being like, okay, well, never mind. We might not be doing this, you know. Um, and I think now they're having third parties do it, if I'm right. Like, I think like Sega's doing one for them.
Uh,
probably.
no, Hyenas fell apart, and I think Sega's Super Game is cross-platform. My understanding is that the third parties, the leaked rumor was third parties would be working on single-player stuff, and it would be the internal studios working on live service stuff. But this is all like
Yeah.
leaks and rumors, and no one really knows what is going on for sure, or whether Jim Ryan's departure was linked to controversies over live service. That's also one of the rumors. Then there was the departure of Connie Booth from Sony, which who was apparently a champion internally for Sony's single player stuff. There's some controversy over that. No one really knows for sure what's been going on, and in particular, the reporting around the departure of Connie Booth has been really vague. So, yeah, it's really hard to know what's going on internally at Sony regarding their live service efforts.
Been a little more tight-lipped than some of the other studios.
I mean, they tend to be that way about everything, though. Is they tend to play it very, very close to the chest, but at the same time they get surprised when, you know, since other aspects of the industry, you know, can't read their minds or know what they're going to do. It's like, oh well, you know, like with the whole thing about Microsoft buying, you know, or well, I guess the court decided, no, you're not going to buy Activision anymore. Is that right?
No, the sale went final on the 13th.
Oh,
they fully own it now.
Yeah, there's like, well, we can't know, like, you know, we can't know what Sony wants, so I guess it will be okay if we buy Activision. And then Sony's like, hey, wait, no, we wanted that first. And then they, you know, then they decide to go to court over it. It's like, well, we can't read your mind. We don't know what you wanted because you wouldn't say anything. But I don't know. Like, Sony's kind of, like, just kind of, to my knowledge, they've just kind of always been that way. And I don't know how much of that has to do with, you know, being, you know, a Japanese-based company where, you know, they kind of are at arm's length on a lot of things. I'm genuinely not sure.
Yeah, I don't have a good read on them either, honestly. It just seems like they were able to write their own checks for a long time, because their first party stuff was just crushing. And then it kind of seems like over time it's slowly started to kind of slip where, okay, now, it feels more to me like they feel the pinch than I would, like, as an outsider, that I see them.
The PS3 was kind of the first indication of their first party stuff not being as good, just because I think of the very first quote unquote first party games that got released for the PS3 was Folklore, a game that almost nobody has heard of now, I loved that game. It's fantastic.
It's the first time hearing of it.
Yeah, it was like a RPG.
It was the only game to make the motion control on the DualShock 4 in a way that was really cool, really responsive, consistently worked and made sense, and nobody played it. And it's such a shame because it is such a weird little gem of a game. It's based in Welsh mythology and stuff. It is so cool. But
I'm looking at the Wikipedia article for the developer of the game, and the first sentence is Game Republic Incorporated was an independent video game developer. And I think that kind of tracks.
that's essentially the point I was about to get to, is that they kind of took this weird turn. I mean, the PS3 era was just weird for Sony and the Japanese game industry in general, which could be its own whole episode, but they just kind of took this weird turn with their first parties, which I personally appreciate, because we got a lot of really weird games out of it, but they weren't games that were nearly as well received as the first party games on the regular PlayStation, the PS2, for instance. So, I think that has something to do with it, I have to imagine.
For sure. Yeah. I think the PS3 era was pretty humbling for Sony, and then when they struck gold with the PS4, they kind of, for a while, thought they could continue down that route and build on it, without realizing that if they were going to take a left turn, like with live service, they're really going to have to sell it to the gaming public, and it would cost a lot of upfront costs in development, which I think they're running into now, realizing that cheap credit is no longer available. So building up all this live service infrastructure at the same time they're trying to maintain ever ballooning costs in single player development to keep up that cinematic quality. It's no longer as easy as it once was to do.
For sure.
All right, so that's what's going on in the industry right now. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, it'll be time for our Starfield spoiler chat. So if you haven't yet finished Starfield, shut off the episode, go hug your family, and do your chores.
We don't talk about
and then come back in a week or two when you finish Starfield, after you've given your requisite love and adoration to your family, and then you can listen to the rest of this podcast. And if you've already finished Starfield, then listen to the interlude, and we'll be back right after that. Welcome back to the Avocado Games Cast. I hope you enjoyed our little musical interlude, a little ditty that I composed back when I was a high school student. That's a MIDI recording of that whole nonsense. So, if you're still here, you're here because you have finished Starfield. For some value of the word finished, you've completed at least one playthrough, you're aware that New Game Plus exists, and we're going to spoil everything about the game. If you haven't already played it or finished it, now's your last chance to turn around before we start telling you all the secrets of the game. Okay, let's get into it. We gave you your chance. All right, so
I started to get into a little bit with you when we were talking about it, the first time around, and I just got to start out with, what do you think of the way they applied New Game Plus? Let's just start there.
Okay, let's get right in. Okay, let's start there, and we'll kind of get back to our general impressions. I think it's actually really fascinating.
Yeah,
I think it's a really interesting implementation of New Game Plus. The idea that it's not like Nier Automata, where they really shouldn't have called it New Game Plus. It's really just like 3 separate games. This is very much like you're rolling the dice each time and kind of sliding doors way, and then proceeding through the game with things slightly tweaked. I've heard things get really wild once you go through like New Game Plus 5 or 6.
Yeah,
and then things go really wild.
Through is just kind of like, it's just kind of meh. But I know the more you do it, the weirder stuff gets.
So I ended up at New Game 4 when decided, okay, I'm gonna wait for mods from here on out. But I really like the way that they bent the New Game Plus around in kind of a narrative way that made sense and in a smart, cool, hey, this actually matters way. And each subsequent playthrough, it kind of built on itself, which is awesome. New Game Pluses, to me, I don't enjoy them. I don't see the point a lot of times. But yeah, I don't know. This one felt like it almost seemed like it was designed around the New Game Plus in a lot of ways, which I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, I think certain games definitely are, where New Game Plus unlocks new modes or new ways of playing. It's the first time I can think of a Bethesda game really being designed towards the idea that you are going to go through multiple copies of this universe and experience it from a slightly different angle each time. And I think that's really neat in terms of what it means for the general design of the game and how that manifests itself in the actual experience of playing through it. In some way, I kind of wish you weren't restarting from zero each time.
Yeah,
but I understand why they do.
I don't know. I cheated. I got to New Game Plus, and then I got to I get my my dumb. The ships are stupid looking. I'm sorry. The Starborn ships look dumb. I'll just go. They look ridiculous. But again, my
they look a little Giorgio O'Keefe.
Yeah.
I'll say.
Yeah. And I get to the lodge, and it's just like, hello, I am from the future. Here's what you need to do, and they're like, oh, okay. They don't even question it, and I'm like, really? And so I just went back to my old save pre New Game Plus, but the thing about you keep all of your levels, but not all of the stuff that you've found. I can understand it to a point. It's a brand new universe. There's a good chance that some of the planets, maybe they're not the same, but also there are so fucking many of them. How would you know? I think they should let you keep at least some of the planet stuff. If you have all of the skills and everything, scanning planets is a lot easier. But I think because of the way that the game is structured and because of how much content there is, it's the thought of doing New Game Plus is a bit daunting, especially with the faction quests, especially the Ryujin quest in particular. I'm gonna have to do all of that shit again. Fuck that. Just because that's the thing that usually keeps me from doing New Game Plus is I get excited. Yeah, I'm gonna play the game again, and then I remember the specific part of the game that I absolutely hate, and then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to do that again. Never mind, I don't want to do it.
There's a fair amount though that I will say, like some of the more annoying quests actually you can skip just
hell yeah.
basically through dialogue and be
Oh,
like,
is
yeah,
it the Starborn option?
yeah, there is.
I know there's one for the UC Vanguard where you're just like, it is fate, and they're like, oh shit, okay, well, all right then, and you're like, wait,
Yeah.
really? That's it?
Yeah, no, there's a couple that are like that, and it's like, no, actually, I'm the Starborn. I know how this works, and then like you can just be like, yeah, I just know how this works. See you guys later. I'm gonna go fix this. And yeah, there's a couple times where you know the knowledge, and you talking to people is like, wow, how do you know that? That's weird. And then you're like, yeah, I'm from the future, basically. And they go, okay, well, quest over.
I love that people just believe you. Like, you could just be some rando. You could be some weirdo from nowhere. You just like, it was like, no, I believe you. It's like, well, okay.
I do like how this game has kind of weird internal justifications for stuff like that, where like you can join opposing factions and nothing gets affected. I love the in-universe reason for why you can join both the Crimson Fleet and UC Vanguard and betray UC Sistef. It's because no one likes a Conde.
Yeah.
I think he's a sanctimonious asshole. Like,
Jesus.
Whatever, it doesn't matter if you
like
blew up his ship.
And you know, I think what kind of ties it all together to me is that a lot of Bethesda games tell you you're important, but they don't really show you how, right? But this is like next level, you know what I mean? Importance. You you can relive the future basically, or the past, as many times as you want, and you can fix it till it gets right. It reminds me of that Tom Cruise movie. It got renamed.
Tomorrow?
I think it was like Live, Die, Repeat or something like that.
Yeah, Edge of Tomorrow.
I think Live, Die, the name of the manga.
Live, Die, Repeat ended up being the tagline of the movie.
Yeah. The Live, Die, Repeat is the manga, and the actual film, I think, was called Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah. And so like that's kind of what I feel like every time I load up a Starborn. I'm kind of like, okay, I've learned, you know, I learned enough. I've done the quest, and I think it kind of incentivizes you to not, maybe like min max push through super hard, your playthrough, and instead do it kind of, you know, what your character is comfortable with, kind of. But yeah, I enjoyed it. The ending kind of came out to me almost out of nowhere, and I think that the Unity idea is a cool one. It's kind of that metaphysical whatever, you know. Maybe doesn't make a ton of sense, right? But overall, like I thought it worked out well for the series.
Yeah, I'm very positive on the main plot of this game. Like more positive than I am about the game as a whole. In that there are very few games or very few works of art that really explore or cover scientific exploration in a way that doesn't feel like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like everything feels like some variation on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Where, you know, doing science has major consequences that hurt a lot of people. And it feels like a really unnuanced and frankly shallow, like, I'm not insulting Frankenstein, by the way, but like what followed in Frankenstein's wake, let's say, has taken this really unnuanced and shallow view of what scientific progress and achievement looks like. And I like that this is a game that talks about the costs and the drive behind curiosity,
right?
And how that leads to scientific progress, which can come at personal cost, might come at cost for others, but this game really emphasizes the personal cost here and the personal consequences of pursuing that kind of dream.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm back and forth on it. I think, like, this is like, because I was talking with my partner last night, and about this game, and something that we both kind of steadily realized is that like the further removed from we got from Starfield, the less we liked it. I like the note that I have here is Starfield is one of the worst games I've ever sunk 193 hours into.
And Merve had the opposite. That's interesting.
Well,
it's why I wanted. Sorry, Quinley. Let's you.
Huh?
Yeah, go ahead, Quinley.
Yeah, and it's why I wanted to kind of talk about it, because one of the things is that like it is interesting to see. It's like some of the stuff, like the issues I have with the story and like the characterization and stuff, can be chalked up to the fact that Bethesda is taking a risk on creating a new IP, and they just they've released it out to the world, which, you know, for any studio like Bethesda that has largely just relied on, you know, 2 or 3 IPs, like that is a big risk for a company, and I don't want, or like for a studio, and I don't want to minimize that. So some of the shortcomings in the narrative and the story can be chalked up to like I think they kind of released this game still not quite knowing what they wanted it to be, like wholly exactly. But as far as like, I guess, do you want me to talk about the game itself or just jump into the issues?
No, let's get into the game itself and learn your general thoughts on that.
I like the gameplay. I think the gameplay is fun. Like it reminds me a lot of Fallout 4 in that the actual like running and gunning, the actual shooting, and the actual weapons are a lot of fun to use. I think it's it's not the mag pulse. It's the mag that you get in the Crimson Fleet mission. It's Delgado's thing where you're just shooting like 50 nails at a time or whatever it is, and it's also poison. I fucking love that gun. That is my favorite gun in the fucking game. Like,
I don't think I got that one. The one I use from the Crimson Fleet quest is the Ember pistol, which is just like this energy pistol that tears through everything.
I use weapons because I wanted to use energy weapons, but the more I went through the game, the more I realized that, there's really only like 3 energy weapons, and unless you're willing to like craft your entire build around that, they are not that useful, and it severely limits what weapons you can pick up, just because there's like, if you're able to craft your build around them and you're able to mod the shit out of them, they can be really powerful weapons. But I didn't have the patience for that, so I ended up just doing my Bethesda stealth, whatever the Starfield equivalent of the Bethesda, you know, stealth archer build is, with like stuff. But like the actual gameplay part, like the actual combat is a lot of fun. I love shooting everybody's packs, especially on low gravity planets, and watching them just shoot into the air and then just knock them down. That's hilarious. That will never not be funny.
I don't think I ever ended up doing that.
Oh god, like go to any low gravity moon, and like if you like you're fighting anybody outside, just shoot their pack. Just shoot their pack, because like it'll start making sparks. They freak out, and then they just shoot up into the air.
They just pawing at it until they just
or if you do it inside, they just shoot up into the ceiling and they're just hanging from the ceiling, which is incredibly funny. The RPG.
I think I made a mistake playing on normal and just being able to like one-shot everybody in the head. Probably should have played on hard to get that kind of stuff happening.
I would argue you could actually crank it up to very hard, because the higher the difficulty is, the better the drops are.
Yeah, I kind of agree, and it does incentivize you to explore a little bit more when you're getting really, really good stuff from those drops as well.
Yeah, like I've gotten some fantastic legendaries after I kicked up the difficulty, but like I don't like the piloting. I don't like the dogfights that much, and like I mentioned this earlier, but I have a phobia, like a pretty legitimate phobia of space and space travel. I don't like the idea of being in space. I don't like the vacuum of space, and so I did not really like Like, for the first part of it, you're on the planet, so, like, I didn't think anything of it, and then it's like, Barrett shows up and is like, okay, take my ship, and I'm like, oh, cool, the ship, and then I get in the ship, and I get behind the pilot seat, and I'm like, oh, wait, that's right, I hate this, this is terrifying, and I don't like it. So it took me a very long time to get used to it, and I eventually did, but even, like, if I'd be walking around the ship and there was a porthole, like, on the floor, and I'd look down at the floor, be like, oh, nope, 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 there's nothing down there. It doesn't go anywhere. Jesus Christ. But, so yeah, I didn't really like that part. As far as I agree about the progression. There's some stuff that's locked behind skill trees that really shouldn't be. Like, it's really weird how the skill tree works. Like, at first I was like, oh, this seems really cool, but then, like, there are some really simple things that I feel like
boost pack usage. I don't know why that's a skill.
Boost pack usage, like, I feel like that should have just been a tutorial thing. I feel like the oxygen stuff, I feel like that should just be a level up. Like, that should just be its own stat that you get. I feel like, honestly, a lot of the physical skills is stuff that, like, I feel like you could kind of get rid of the physical skill tree. I feel like that should just be tied into level ups, because having to micromanage in that way is really difficult, and because there are so many skill trees, like,
and so few skill points.
Yeah, the skill points are few and far between compared to Fallout.
Yeah, and, like, that's the big thing. And there are some times, like, where you can do certain faction quests. I've learned that some faction quests will give you a skill point instead of just experience. So that might be a reason to do some of the Radiant faction quests, so you can get skill points that way. But even still, like, the higher level you get, the fewer and fewer you come across, and it just becomes a chore to do.
Yeah.
Especially with the outpost building, like, I know for my next New Game Plus, assuming I go back to it, I'm not gonna bother with outposts. I'm just gonna build a giant cargo ship that has 4,000 cargo and keep all of my workbenches on the ship instead of trying to create an outpost. Because, like, the transport, the supply link stuff, it just doesn't work. I don't know, maybe they fixed it. It just doesn't fucking work.
The outposts were by far my most disappointing part of the game. I think they never really clicked for me, and that's disappointing, because I really enjoyed that a lot in Fallout 3 and 4. But yeah, I was very, very disappointed by that as well.
Which sucks, because, like, in terms of actually building the outposts, there are some things that are a lot better. Like, you can do the bird's eye view to place stuff, but placement of buildings, like connecting buildings, is incredibly finicky. And also, you can't build stairs.
Yeah, it's like
there are stairs
tagged into the
but they're on the inside. So, like, for me, like, with the cargo thing, like, I had all of these, warehouses where I was keeping stuff, and I had to keep building more and more, and I didn't want to, like, spread it out, because, you only have so much space in the actual outpost. So I ended up building up, and I'm like, well, I'll just build stairs. And then I look, and I'm like, I don't have any what? There's no stairs. So I had to build,
have ladders?
No stairs, no ladders, no lifts, nothing.
So you make makeshift stairs out of, like, boxes, and then you, like, boost your way up?
What I did was I built prefabs that were, like, I built a 2-story, and then I built a 1-story right next to it, and I used the stairs that's on the outside of the prefab. But yeah, like, I feel like that has to be an oversight. Like, it's just
a mess. The outpost is very poorly designed, I think.
Yeah. Like,
that's a shame.
It has the potential to be so good and interesting, because there is stuff there, but I think that is one of my overall issues with the game, is there is so much unfulfilled potential here.
Yeah.
Like, it is a good foundation. Like, like with quest, the fact that that's not a faction quest that's tied to outpost management, which would incentivize you building outposts,
Sorry, which quest?
So it's not even a quest really. It's the Radiant quest. List is one of the. It's basically an organization for independent settlers. So independent of UC, independent of Freestar. I think you have to first meet the guy, the recruiter on Mars in the bar on the first floor.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Stack
Yeah.
of papers in front of him.
I love him. He is my favorite NPC in the game. He's fantastic. I love him so much. I wish you could recruit him. But at first I was like, oh, this is the part where like I start seeking out planets, because he's like, you need to seek out planets with these specifications, and then you need to find people, you need to recruit people to place them so that they can settle this planet independent of Freestar and UC influence, and they can live their own lives. There is some indication in some dialogue with other people that there might be something shady going on with List, because the few settlers that are part of List that you do meet, the impression that I get is that they've made it work now, but that when they first started out, it felt like they were left holding the bag.
Yeah.
And but they don't get into that. And at first I'm like, okay, so once I find them and place the planet, you're going to have me build an outpost, right? And they're like, no, you just needed to find them and place them. And I'm like, wait, really? That's it? You don't want me to like build them a house? I can build them a house. And they're like, no, we don't have that done. And you're just like, huh. Or like the Trackers Alliance, which is that bounty hunter alliance. They're whatever. That's only Radiant quests. They don't have a faction quest line either. And
what I ended up doing with Outpost was I did the tutorial quest for the Outpost where they like kind of force you to make one. I literally just set up a mine, and then so I could assign my my crew members somewhere because I ran out of space on my ship. I just built a bunch of desks. So these people have like desks outdoors on some desolate planet. They're just sitting there in their spacesuits at the desk.
And that's like that's like behind skills is how many people you can assign, how many people you can have on your ship, but you end up with really big ships that can have like 7 people, but you can only carry 3, which is annoying.
Yeah, so I didn't really follow the spirit of the game. I just kind of like built the bare minimum outpost with outdoor desks.
It's fine. It's open concept.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exposed to the elements, or in the case of a planet with no atmosphere, the lack thereof.
A bunch of standing desks.
Exactly. No, I gave them seats. I'm not cruel.
Yeah, they have like
come with chairs.
Those little desks have like a built-in seat. It's kind of funny. It's like the world's worst office chair kind of thing.
Yeah. A desk, but not a roof over their heads, to protect them from the elements. And the giant because the oxygen is 26% on this planet.
So in Canada, we have a grocery chain called No Frills, which is one of our discount grocery chains. And I just imagine a No Frills as being a place where you go and they're like, there's no cart, there's no bags. You just like grab your produce and you buy the armful and you take it to the cash register, and then they ring you up and you run out with your produce in your arms. And that's kind of what I imagine this version of my outpost is like. It's the no frills version of like an office. A roof would be a frill, right?
Yeah.
So as for my like general thoughts on the game, before we dip back into spoilers. So one thing I've said about Starfield is that it's a 9 out of 10 game trapped in a 6 out of 10 game's body. And I think that kind of describes it pretty well. Like, there's so much about the general like fundamentals of this game that I think are really neat. I actually really dig the lore. I don't really agree with those people who say it's dry. I actually really dig the world that they've built. But unfortunately, they've kind of shoved all that into this really janky framework that doesn't always service the game's ideas as well as I think they could be serviced. It's like this really bizarre mix of super duper polished and really well thought out stuff. Like the lighting upgrades they've made to the creation engine are just like chef's kiss. The lighting in this game is fantastic. But then you'll run into like the most bizarre audio bugs. and like you're playing this game with this really fantastic lighting where the lip sync between the audio and the mouth movements is all off. It's just such a bizarre feeling.
Did you run into the bug where if you have a companion with you and they're shooting, like if you're in a fight, they'll start like shooting their gun, and then after the fight's over, you'll still hear the sound of them shooting their gun, but they're just standing there staring at you, and like you can tell it's coming. Like I could tell it was coming from them because this happened with America. She has the shotgun, and I was like, okay, woo, that fight was rough. Okay, America, are you ready to? And she's just standing there, and I just hear over and over, and then like,
wait, who's America?
oh, she's one of the random companions you can get at one of the bars on
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you find her
Like
very
Rosie
early
and,
on.
and like that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just never ran into her. Okay.
But like,
Cool.
I'm like, wait here a sec, and I have her wait there, and then I walk away from her, and it gets quieter and quieter, and then the closer I get to her, I'm like, okay, this shotgun sound is coming from you, but you're just standing here. Like, did you ever run into that bug?
No, the bug that I kept running into, which a lot of people have, but it's not consistent across installs, is that the first line of dialogue that an NPC speaks will always be out of sync with their mouth movements, and then the mouth movements and sound catch up for subsequent lines. And this happens for literally every conversation, unless you interrupt an NPC mid-speech.
Huh, I never ran into that.
My particular one
Yeah.
was there was a weird, like every time a door would open, like the game would just like try to load the sound, and you could hear the sound, but the game itself was crashed. That was always the most frustrating.
I mean, that's playing the hits. That's a Bethesda classic, though.
Yeah.
I didn't have a single crash. I think I win.
I had a lot of crashes at first, and like when I went to look at it, like it honestly it turned out to just be my graphics card. So I just bit the bullet and bought a new, very nice graphics card, frankly.
Oh,
But
wow.
after that, like, because I was getting crashes, the main place I got crashes was whenever I went to Aquila, and like after a certain point, like I had initiated Sam's quest, and I was at the point where you can't dismiss him and you have to go to Aquila. But every time I went to Aquila, it crashed, like just immediate crash to desktop. But once I upgraded the graphics card, I was able to. I'm like, okay, well, time to test it, and I played it for 16 hours straight, no crashes.
Aquila is actually one of the places with that really, really impressive lighting. And I'm sure it's probably what's like crashing it because it's processing a lot. If you go walk along the ramparts of the city, and especially if you stand there at sunrise and sunset, what they do with the lighting there is just absolutely fantastic. But it's probably really taxing on the graphics card. It also is where my frame rate would get hit the most.
Yes, same. Like even with the nicer card, like if there are like a lot of, especially that first area where you walk through the entrance and there are like a lot of people walking around, especially during the day, like just it's a significant dip, and then like once you get further in, it's not as bad. But yeah,
my frame rate would dip from like 90 to 25 maybe, and I'm running on an RTX 4070, so yeah.
So it's like, okay, it's just going to be a PowerPoint for like these next few steps.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, one thing I will say about the structure of Starfield is that I think I went in expecting this to be a lot more structurally like previous Bethesda titles, like your Oblivions, your Skyrims, your Fallouts, etc. And structurally, it really isn't like that because it's not an open world game. It's very much like they took a traditional Western RPG and they bolted No Man's Sky onto it. And you know, I think that's a valid approach for a game, but it's also being marketed as Bethesda's next big title. So I think people went in with the expectation that it would play a lot like Skyrim and Oblivion. And when it didn't, when it wasn't structurally built the same way, and exploration meant a different thing in Starfield than it does in a more traditional open world game, like I understand why people are kind of disappointed in that. Personally, I'm not, because for me, the most meaningful exploration is like even discovering lore and writing and reading about planets. Like I think back to a game like Opus Echo Star Song, where you never really land on many planets, but you read the descriptions of stuff as you sail by them in space. And that for me is really meaningful and really cool. And I got a bit of that from Starfield, and that's really what I was looking for. Overall though, I started off loving it, then grew really tired of it because I ran into some pretty serious bugs that ruined my progression. I had to like go back to an earlier save and mess around with stuff to keep going. And the gameplay gets really repetitive after the first 20 hours. And then once I got through some more faction quests and things opened up a bit and the gameplay got a little more varied again, I started liking it again. So I've been on kind of a roller coaster with this game.
I think
ended up positive on it in the end.
I think I was on the same roller coaster, and then I kind of got to the point where like I was like, I'm just gonna have to roll with what the game gives me, and I did enjoy it. Yeah.
I think I went into it with I saw all the trailers and everything like that and all the presentations, but I went into it with no expectations just because this is a new IP. I did not go into it expecting it to be Skyrim in space or Fallout 4 or whatever, what have you, in space. Like, I just went into it, this is brand new, and I think because I was able to engage the game on its own terms as it was, I got a lot more enjoyment out of it than I would have otherwise. I do think the progression, like the skill tree, is a big issue. I'm like you say here, I'm really looking forward to mods. I think that is where this game will shine.
Yeah, truly. I 100% agree.
Because the main thing, honestly, if the points of interest, the Radiant quests and the points of interest, if those were more varied dungeons and not literal copy-paste, I would probably still be playing it. Like, honest to God, I'd probably still be playing this game. But, like, once you go to one cryolab and then you go to another cryolab and you find the exact same recorded messages, you find the exact same computers, and everything is laid out the exact same way, enemies are in the exact same spawn points, you're just like, oh, it's just going to be this over and over.
Yeah, the really galling part is that the main quest took me to 2 cryolabs. Just by, I guess, maybe by random selection. And, like, this is the main quest, repeating the same location twice,
right.
Which, not cool.
Yeah.
One thing I would say my favorite quest in the game is probably the dimension hopping, that where you go to that science outpost and you do all the dimension hopping towards the end in the main story quest.
Oh yeah, it's like got this cool puzzle element. It's very much like a crack in the slab from Dishonored 2 or Effect and Cause from Titanfall 2.
Yeah.
It has a lot of those vibes.
Yeah, and also I love that because I remember I'd see it in the loading screens. I'm like, oh wow, that place looks like a shithole. And then you get there and like, oh hey, it's the shithole from the loading screen. But the other thing I like about it is because, back to what you were saying about that dynamic lighting, and like it really shines in there because it, ironically, because it is very dark for a lot of it. And like that quest to me, like especially when you're in the other world where everything's terrible and it's infested with whatever, it almost feels like a horror game. Like I played it like a horror game. I moved slowly, very cautiously, looking around corners to see what was ahead of me, to make sure there's nothing in the room, to make sure that like, something isn't coming up behind me and gonna freak me out by jumping on me. Like I love that quest. It's so cool.
The way I made it horror game-like for myself was I played almost the entirety of that quest until the final battle with a shotgun.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. I had this like really... I forget where I unlocked the shotgun, but it's the one that has both a ballistic and an energy component. So it does like super damage.
Is that the one you get for the UC Vanguard quest, the Xenomorph part?
No, I think I got it very much later, but I forget exactly where I got it. Might have been from the UC Vanguard quest, actually. I don't know. I forget what the name of that weapon is. I'll have to look it up.
There's a lot of like those like perks that are really synergistic too. Like you start to pick them up and you're like, you get to know like, oh wow, this perk works really good with this. And over time you really kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a good time in that quest, and that was like towards the end where I think like a lot of the main quest content, like the handcrafted stuff, it's so cool, right? It's so well constructed, and then like a lot of the faction quest stuff is also really well constructed, and there are like one or two side quests that are also really well constructed. But it's really hard sorting like the well constructed side quests from the things that are just like go here and talk to this person, and then talk to that person, and then talk to the first person again. And I wish there were a better way of saying like of the game telling you, okay, here are the good side quests and here are the bullshit side quests.
Yeah.
And then I'd know what would be worth my time. Because when you see that little cyan logo with the cross through it, or whatever the shape of that logo is, you're like, I don't know whether this is going to be worth my time or not.
Right.
A lot of those quests are, like the one where you can essentially enslave the people above the Paradise Resort, which is a horrid, extremely unethical outcome.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who would have picked that one. That's a rough one.
Which quest is that?
So there's this. I don't know if you did this one, but there is a mysterious ship that is parked above the resort planet Paradiso.
Oh, yes. The colony ship, the one that before everybody else on Earth. Yeah, I really like that quest. I wish parts of it weren't bugged, because now I can't progress in it because I can't find like there was somebody who's like, hey, go find the colony, because there's a glitch where after the colony ship leaves, the quest marker stays near Paradiso even though the ship has moved somewhere else, and now I have no idea where it is and I can't find it, so I can't progress. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm done with that quest.
You can't deliver them their mail.
Yeah, that.
Yeah. So there are like fun side quests like that, and there are also side quests that are just like, stay here for 5 minutes and talk to these people. And doing a few of those is fine, but there are a lot of those in Starfield, and sometimes I'm just like, I don't want to do that. So I wish there were a way of kind of differentiating that content a little better, and like sorting out the meaty side quests from the not so meaty ones. And they tried to do it a little bit by separating the Radiant stuff from the regular side quests, but I don't know if they totally succeeded in that regard.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are kind of my general thoughts on the game. In the last little bit of this, let's kind of get back to the story and where it goes, and what we think it means for potentially the franchise going forward. So, like I said, I really enjoyed the story. I actually mostly enjoyed the faction quests. The one I didn't I liked parts of all of them. I think Region takes way too long to get started. Freestar starts off promising and it just ends way too abruptly. Crimson Fleet, I don't know if I really like the plot, but I liked all the characters. UC Vanguard, though, fantastic pretty much right to the end.
Yeah, that one I have seen universal praise, and the UC Vanguard, like the Terramorph quest, is so much fun. It's so cool. I did not like the Crimson Fleet quest that much.
No, and I hated the Crimson Fleet. That's a big reason everybody.
Thank you.
So they are like annoying.
They're so profoundly dumb. And like you talk to Conde and he's like, "Oh, that Delgado, he's a shrewd one." It's like, I have talked to him. I assure you, he is not. You could run up on them right now and have no trouble at all. Like his own people don't listen to him.
They're very like Goonies pirates. Like they're not very scary.
He's like, they got to get the credits. We got to get credits. And I'm like, what are you gonna do with the credits once you have them? And then like the thing that frustrated me the most about that quest is that like they're, especially with the friction between what's her name, Neva, his second command, and him, like where she clearly does not fully respect him and talks back to him. Everybody kind of does. I feel like there was an interesting tension to explore there, but you don't get to talk to Delgado
Like
at
someone's
all.
like a true believer versus someone who wants like to go in a new direction, basically.
Like you don't get the impression, like it's unclear what their goals even are. Like they just want a lot of money to, it's like to do what? To buy stuff from the 5 shops on the key. Like
Yeah.
it's when you go on the other quests and you meet like all of those characters, like the guy on the cruise ship, for example, like he wants back in because the only reason he got kicked out is because apparently he made Neva look bad or something. Like you he at least has a goal that I can, like a concrete goal that I can understand. And like I understand like the smuggling chick, like she's really cool. Like they're fine, but the rest of the Crimson Fleet they just fucking suck.
Yeah. When she called me Rook for like the 1 millionth time after I've like done everything in the galaxy to like make them worthwhile, I'm like, all right, just never mind. We're not going to get anywhere with this.
The best comment I saw about that is like, call me the Rook because I capture anything that's in front of me. It's like, all right.
Okay, that's pretty
Womp
good.
womp. The reason I kind of enjoyed these like dumb goofballs is because I didn't take them seriously. Like, if they get a lot of money, I think these are people who are just like super shallow and just like don't see money as a means to an end. They see money as the end itself, right? So, like, I don't like my headcanon is that they can't do much harm if I side with them and like let them get their hands on Crix's legacy. So when my companions all like berated me for siding with the Crimson Fleet in the end, I was like, whatever, doesn't matter. They're not going to do that much damage. Who cares?
What's the worst they can do? I mean, they almost blew up their own space station.
Yeah, like also I personally I don't like that you don't have the option to just fuck off with the bag. Like it's like, okay, I've got Crix's legacy. I probably know somebody, because like my first thought was I'm gonna take Crix's legacy, and I've done the Ryujin quest, so I know there's that hacker guy on Neon who I already have contact with. I'll just take this thing over to him, have him decrypt it, maybe give him a cut, and then I'll take the rest. And it doesn't let you do that. It doesn't let you just take it with you. And like I kind of understand why, but also come on.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't let you be as imaginative as you could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, I wish this game had some more immersive simi elements where you could make those connections, and like different parts of the game played with each other a little better instead of being so siloed. Like if you have too many interconnections, it can end up being a little artificial, and it can make the world seem way too small. But a little bit of that where you can cleverly exploit something you know about another part of the world would have gone a long way.
Well, and I mean, they're already doing that with New Game Plus because you're the Starborn. You have all of those connections already because you know everything. So, like, the fact that it's not really in the base game is a little. It seems odd to me.
Yeah, I think it is part of their approach to how Bethesda approaches their games, where they really want the different story elements to be siloed. Because I think the fear is that if you do one thing and you cut off a whole bunch of other content, then you're going to feel shortchanged. But I think games should occasionally make you feel a little shortchanged. Like decisions you make should have consequences. I mean, I don't mean that if you do one faction quest, it shuts you out of everything else. But it should, like, doing one faction quest should narrow your range of possibilities in others and expand your range of possibilities in some other quests.
Yeah, because then that gives you incentive, to go replay the game, right? Like that was most of the replayability that I got out of like Skyrim and stuff is like, yeah, you can do all of it, but if you're going to go full on the role play, it's like, okay, I'm going to save that faction quest for the next playthrough or for this character or for this build or whatever.
And that would really play well into New Game Plus here, where you are starting with, give or take the skills, a clean slate every time.
Yeah. And that's especially prevalent if you, Kappa, I don't know if you got this one, but have you gotten the New Game Plus where you go to the lodge and it's all just different versions of you?
Yeah, it's clones of you.
There's the one of you in the corner that's just like, yeah, I just took Barrett's ship and fucked off.
Yeah.
Like, I want to do that playthrough.
Yeah, there. I got that one. I want to say my fourth one. It's very inconsistent. I mean, so like you have to look. I think there's 10 of them that people have like documented so far. But I think I got that one my fourth one. It was either my third or fourth. But even in New Game 1 Plus, it's very cool. And you can kind of just beeline it. You can just do probably the main quest, and I don't even know. I think one of mine was like maybe like 3 hours, 4 hours, because you just you don't have to do everything again. You're the Starborn. You know the way to go through and do it all. So very cool, just in general, like giving you that ability to not feel like you have to redo the whole game.
Yeah, I hear there's one where like Cora's an adult and she wants revenge on you for killing her dad.
Yeah,
which is
like
so bizarre.
Crimson Fleet, I think, is what I read.
Yeah, I think you can. Is it true that you can only get that one if Sam is the one who dies in your first playthrough?
I think so. Yeah, I think if he's the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Then that's the one where, she blames you for sacrificing her dad.
Yeah.
Oh, so Sam dies if you go to the eye instead of staying behind the lodge.
So
no. So
is it Walter?
No.
Who dies?
So the way that it works is that who dies depends entirely upon who you have the highest relationship affinity with. And like sometimes that, like, obviously people have figured that out, so they're kind of gaming it now by just spending a lot of time with a character they don't actually give a shit about, so that when they get to that point they can lose them and like, okay, now we can actually
easy way to kill Sarah. Awesome.
So there was one post I read where somebody was romancing Sarah, and right before that quest they had decided to get married and they were going to do that whole thing, and they just finished a personal quest, which I've heard is actually very good.
Yeah, it's better than
and they had just finished that, so they had this beautiful moment where they were going to get married, and then they put it on hold to do that quest, and she died. And they were just like, oh my god, what? But like, I think one of my favorite and probably most heartbreaking ones that you can do is if you do the New Game Plus and Barrett, I think, has to survive the first one, because Barrett is the only other he's the only other companion that can get Starborn powers. Nobody else can. He can, though. But if you give him the Starborn powers in a New Game Plus, the first thing he does is summon a different version of himself from another universe where his husband did not die. And the conversation they have is heartbreaking.
Which is why he's so chill about everything, kind of. Like, it kind of
less
explains
chill, it's more that he's just kind of keeping everything at an arm's length, and it is. And I wish there was more stuff like that. I wish there was more stuff like that in the game, because they clearly show that they are able to do it, and they limit it to this one part, and it's just. And I mean, I can see it kind of being like, a reward for examining everything, but Merv, like you said, you don't always know which quests are going to be worth the time and have that really deep, really interesting narrative for the player to explore. So stuff like that is very easily missable, and it's arguably one of the best parts of the game.
Yes, I stumbled upon that just through regular play. Like, I wasn't trying to get to that conversation, but yeah, in my playthrough, Barrett went and got that particular clone power, and he had that conversation with the version of himself where Irvin was still alive. It's really neat. It's not like super duper like it's not a tearjerker. But it is emotional and it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because like Barrett doesn't get all weepy about it or anything.
Yeah.
He
just like
is pretty like chill about it, but it is a fascinating look at a life not lived, and what its consequences are. And so, like, yeah, you're right. There is a lot of that emotional depth in Starfield, like, kind of peppered throughout it, and I wish, like, the main story especially, could have used a little bit more of it, because it is fascinating on a conceptual level. and there are bits and pieces of like the emotional consequences for pursuing this, like the unity and becoming a starborn. There are bits and pieces of the emotions people feel at having left Earth behind because of what happened due to grav drive technology, especially if you go to New Homestead on, I think it's on Titan, is it?
Yeah, the new rebuilt Titan, yeah.
Yeah, so stuff like that is peppered throughout the game, and I wish there were more of that emotional through line, because where it is, it's really cool. I just wish there were more of it.
Yeah, I walked away from the whole game just kind of wishing there was more of everything, which is kind of, I think, a good sign, for the game, honestly. There to me, it was like, if this is more fleshed out, this has a lot more cool stuff going on. But it's hard to say exactly what that is,
Yeah, and to be fair to Bethesda, they have said that this is a game that they're going to be periodically releasing more content for, and I think it's going to be free from what I understand. So, they have said that they're going to be releasing content for this like throughout the next few years. So, I mean, it could very well be that we do get more of that. It's just, it would have been nice to see more of that at launch.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it does really feel like a game that went through some compromises to get it out the door. And it did get out the door in, I would say, a finished state, but a state where you can see where potentially they could have done more to really tie it all together and build up that richness into something like something that feels a little bit more coherent, a little bit more like a full, well-considered title rather than bits and pieces of good stuff kind of glued together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, there's in one of the notes here. It's, what do you think it means for humanity to leave their home behind? What happened in Starfield a tragedy? I really want to talk about this because this is easily my biggest problem with Starfield's lore. As fascinating as it is, that this is something that actively bugs me.
Yeah, so let's end on this because I think it is a really interesting topic.
So, one of the main issues that I have with Starfield is that it does not seem to want to take its own premise seriously. And one of the things is, what do you think it means for humanity to leave their home behind? The first thing that I thought of, like, once I figured out the circumstances of, like, humanity leaving, was one, like, there's that moment where you're walking through the UC museum and Sarah is like, wow, says rather incredulously that, wow, it must have been a huge logistical undertaking to get all of those people off world. They never say how many people get off world. And there's things that indicate that the population of Starfield currently is actually incredibly small.
Yeah.
Like one of the things they say about like the what is it, the UC, when they talk about the Civil War, they're like, oh, 30,000 people die. And, obviously not to be flippant about the loss of life, but I was like, really? That's all? 30,000? We lost more of that than that in World War II. What? Like, and the thing that I really think about is, like, if you are a religious person and one of the foundations of your faith is that you genuinely believe that Earth is a gift to humanity from God, I cannot fathom that you would leave it that easily, even under those circumstances. I want to know more about the people who stayed. And the thing, like, one of the first images, like, in thinking about that was about how in Starfield there are religions, or a couple of religions, but the game seems interested in religion, but not faith specifically. Like, there aren't any churches. Nobody really talks about, like, Christianity except in passing. And I'm like, this is a religion that is like the religions that we have on Earth lasted, thousands of years. I highly doubt that they just kind of disappeared over the course of a couple hundred years after being in space. And like, one of the things I thought about was like, Mecca. What was the last Hajj on Earth like? Did they take the Kaaba? Did they leave the Kaaba there? I can't imagine that they would leave it there, right? Like, I have to imagine that they would take it somewhere. And if they did, how did people pray to Mecca? Like, how did they tell, the Muslim faith, like, okay, this is the last day that the Kaaba is going to be open to the public for people who need the Hajj, and then after that, it's leaving. Everybody download the app to calculate where, to track where the Kaaba is in space, so you know which way to pray and everything like that. But like, what does that do to people? Like, when you, especially something like that, like, just what was the last Hajj on Earth like? Like, knowing that this is not going to be here anymore. And there are a whole bunch of other questions. Like, I know Catholicism legitimately, canonically, has contingency plans for if aliens come to Earth, whether or not they would be saved. They actually do, and it's like, no, they don't. They're not familiar with Jesus, so it doesn't apply to them. That's literally the rule. So like, that is something that actively bothers me, because it's like they just didn't seem that interested in exploring that. Or like, the fact that there are no dogs.
Yeah.
There are no dogs. Dogs are extinct. People had to leave their pets on Earth. They just, like, there are so many things that could be explored about people on Earth consciously having to do things for the very last time. And the game just does not seem interested in talking about that.
I mean, I will say you get some of that if you like explore around New Homestead and talk to people, but it's less interested kind of in the finality of it and more in what the day-to-day was like for people. And that's what the perspective that Starfield's writers took on what people want to preserve, is not so much unique things or recurring things, but quotidian things, like things that are preserved things that people do every day. And it's like, it is an interesting statement of values on the part of the people making the game, that what they think people would value would be very pedestrian things. And things that hold significance or meaning end up being what's forgotten. Like, to me, that is a statement of what the writers believe, whether intentional or unintentional. I do think there's some intentionality in that like, when you come to, say, New Homestead and you're confronted with what people have preserved, it's almost asking you to make this value judgment of whether you think that the day-to-day is what's worth preserving. It's almost like it's confronting you with, wait, you didn't preserve all the special things, like all the monuments, you didn't take your family pets with you, like, why is it, why are things the way they are? Why did you choose these particular things to preserve? And it really goes back to kind of the personal meaning that people derive from it. And like, you see the children of the people on New Homestead, they have trouble connecting with that because they don't have that personal connection to what was left behind on space. And it gets lost through the generations. Whereas if they had preserved things that had more universal meaning, maybe you would see those rituals get passed down with more ease. So I think there was some intentionality in that, but it does kind of close off answering the questions about what that finality looks like. It is, I think the game could have covered both.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think, well, like, something else that I think about, you notice that nobody has phones, and not smartphones. There are no phones, but people are clearly making calls, but there are no phones. So like, you mentioned the quotidian day to day. Like, right now, I'm recording this on my phone. Like, the fact that, and also, like, it's only been like 200-ish years. So, but when you talk to people on New Homestead about what Old Earth was like, they talk about it like it was I think even Sarah at one point even straight up says, "Oh, well, what happened to Earth? It's ancient history now." And that's how people talk about it. But it's only been a couple hundred years. Like, that's a
That feels almost like a coping mechanism, though. Like this is like the way society moved on from disaster is to pretend that it was ancient history.
I mean, yeah,
You know what I mean?
I guess, but like I also like to think that this focus on like the now and the future and the fact that they likely had to prioritize, quote unquote, who was gonna get off world and who wasn't. I like to think that that is the reason that the music on Neon is so bad and boring, because like it's the future, but like it is very rote early 2010s EDM, but people talk about it like it is absolutely mind blowing. And how
What's the name of that?
the drum
The artist who's in the club there. What's
Borealis.
her name? Borealis. Who's I think she's supposed to be a send up of Bjork. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there.
Would be insulted first of all, and like also the name of the drug Aurora. Like I hate club scenes in sci-fi games because there a lot of times you can tell they're written by people who have never been to a club in their life and have never done a drug in their life. Like Aurora is a stupid name for a drug because if you're high off your tits, it's going to be incredibly difficult to say. It needs more hard consonants. It needs more hard consonants in it. Also, that's nothing to say of the outfits they're wearing.
Oh yeah, like the squid head things. I don't even know
I
what
don't
those are.
think it is. Sorry, that was just a tangent, but that neon bugs me.
I like that it's kind of a stupid cyberpunk pastiche. Well, I don't think the club is wholly successful, to be clear. But I like that Neon as a whole is this like very deliberate cyberpunk pastiche. Like they know it's every cyberpunk cliche thrown in a blender, and it seems almost self-aware of that.
I don't know.
But the club doesn't seem to have that same self-awareness.
Yeah, well, and I would argue that the whole of Neon doesn't really, because like people talk about it's a wretched hive of scum and villainy. Yeah, okay, sure, fine, but like it's not like there are like for like the thing I'm thinking about is like how like there's so few Radiant events in cities, and I know the actual reason for that is because there's so much scripting going on that if they added more it would be too much for the engine to do. But like the way people talk about Neon versus the way that it actually is
Yeah, like no one robs you
yeah,
there.
like
People probably should be robbing me.
yeah, or like the like because I took the trait Neon Street Rat. So like when people talk about Neon, like I have the option to be like, no, I know what Neon is like, right? But I never it or like you talk about yeah, I came up on the streets and it was really really hard and like yeah, you can kind of see that like if you go to the very bottom floors, I forget exactly what that's called, but like yeah, it looks hard. There are people who are sleeping in shipping containers and stuff, but there's something about it that just doesn't seem it seems like exaggerated the way people talk about it, and it just doesn't match. I don't know, I expected it to be far worse, I guess is what I'm getting at.
We're getting really off on a tangent, but I do want to ask this: is it possible to pick both Neon Street Rat and kid stuff?
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
so.
know. Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
That would be really bizarre. Like you have loving parents who are professors, but you're also a Neon Street Rat. I don't know how they
Rat
reconcile
is
that.
locks you out of the other origins, I think only.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense now.
Well, so South, my partner, he picked kid stuff, and what you find out is that the house that they're living in is brand new because they've just retired, and that you paid for it. So
Yeah,
even if you pick Neon Street Rat, like yeah, they could be from Neon, but you got out of Neon and you make money and you bought them a nice house. So I do like that origin. It's
yeah.
very cute. Like your parents.
It's very funny because you run into your parents in the club at Neon, and they're doing Aurora, and they're like, "Don't judge us."
Very cute.
It's fantastic. All right. So I think we are going to call this episode to a close. If you would like to keep up to date with the podcast, you can follow us on our website at avocadogamescast.wordpress.com. There, we post each episode along with a link dump that tries to fact check some of what we say. You can also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and or Spotify. All you have to do is search for Avocado Gamescast. And make sure you check out the community that spawned this podcast, The Avocado, at the-avocado.org. The character hyphen, not the word hyphen. Typing out the word hyphen is just a silly Billy thing to do, so don't do that. All right. Thank you so much, Kappa and Quinley, for joining me today.
It's good.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was fantastic. We will see you listeners next time. Take care, everyone, and